Good.
Tachyon Aerospace asked a question. Tachyon, can you unmute your mic?
And I think that's Robert O'Keefe, I believe.
I'm from England, Manchester, so I don't know how you'll get on with my accent.
Well, I can understand you quite well.
Hopefully you guys can hear me.
Yep.
Yeah, we can hear you.
Okay. Now it's been great listening in so far. Well, really interesting stuff. We're happy to share what we've been doing concerning anti-gravity. We've found that we're looking at the microwave frequencies and the electromagnetic frequencies, not as you normally would, but as a way of producing really high out-of-phase audible frequencies. And from experiments we've carried out on some of the stuff we've built, we sort of believe that, trying to keep it simple, there's particles that are flowing through everything, through the atoms to the core of the planet. So gravity itself is a weak force that comes from all the different stars within the universe, and that attracted to the core of different planets based on the size of what we call a star seed in the core of the planet. So these particles, as they created in our sun and stream out, they're responsible for the creation of photons. They're pretty much responsible for everything. But one of the things that we found is, as these particles flow through the atomic structure of different materials, they create, one, there's a laminar flow, and then there's interactions where these particles collide with the atomic structure, and which creates photonic bursts of energy, which allows us to see what we're looking at. And then the rest of these particles that pass close by create like an eddy current within the atomic structure. And it's that eddy current which is gravity itself. Now, we tried for about 15 years to shield with, like we built different microwave plasma units, different frequency generators. We messed around with some crazy big electromagnetic field generators. And what we realized was, by creating 7 different frequencies, which are all slightly out of phase of each other, it sets up a harmonic within the material that you're working with. And it's only that harmonic of sound frequencies that allow these particles to be deflected around an object, instead of being able to pass through the object and create that, like the eddy currents, the stiction as they flow through the atomic structure.
Are there any other names of current theories that maybe you could mention, not necessarily academics theories, but even independent theories that you could reference maybe to give more information about how you came to that position?
Not really, no. Just we have a bunch of stuff written up on our website, and
could you link? That would be helpful.
Yeah, I can drop there. Well, if you just type Tachyon Aerospace in Google, we're all over the place. And
I think that's Tachyon Aerospace.earth, right? And so then this is Robert speaking, I think.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. Well, and welcome, sir. Welcome.
Mark, have you measured any objects inside this field to see if there's any weight loss or any spin induced?
Yeah, we've actually got some stuff on video when I dig it out, where we've actually got pieces of steel billet floating, where we've got that assembly. I'll drop you a link to a video of a gravity assist drive that we built. That machine weighs in at about 1.5 ton. Yeah, when the machine started up and running and we applied the frequencies to it, you can lift that machine up from one end with your little finger. So there's, but it's what we learned was that the effects of gravity is, like a gentleman was saying earlier, is greater nearer to the planet, and then as you move away from the planet, it becomes like a weak constant, and different planets have different gravitational effects. And we believe that when a star goes supernova, we believe that the core of the star is solid and it's being fed from a black hole. So we don't believe you can fly into a black hole. We think that the gravitational effect of the core of a star is so immense that it creates this vortex out into another part of the universe and sucks everything in, compresses it into the core, and then the sun is a result of this compression. But also a result of this compression of these particles that stream out into the infinite of the universe from every star. And as they collide with the atomic structure of matter itself, photons are created. So like photons don't travel through the infinite of space, they're being created all the time. So as an example, where you're sat now, everything between what you see in the room and yourself is in darkness. It's the interaction of these particles that are flowing through, say, the table, that every time one of these particles hits the atomic structure of the wood, that wood has got a particular, its atomic structure has got a particular note, a particular frequency, and every time one of these particles strike that, what happens is it's like there's a burst of electromagnetic energy created, which is the photon which you see, and also the particles that don't hit the atomic structure flow through, because everything's 99.9 something empty space anyway, so these particles flow through all this, and the ones that are passed close by the atomic structure is what gravity actually is. So if you take a lump of lead and you take a lump of styrofoam or aluminium, if you was to remove all the empty space, you're not really left with much. So when it's hard to explain. It's just that what we've been doing is we've been looking at microwaves and producing plasmas and frequencies, and a combination of 7 frequencies together, it's always 7 frequencies. But when you combine these frequencies and you resonate the material, then what happens is these particles can no longer pass through. They have to flow around. It's like it shields it from this flow of energy.
Yeah, okay, and I have a couple questions. Oh. Sorry, you can go ahead first, Tim.
Sorry. Well, what you're describing almost sounds like neutrinos, but it's also, when you describe 7 frequencies, I think that's a natural harmonic resonance, right? Isn't that a 7 frequency order?
It's sort of natural harmonics, but you have to knock them out of phase. Like we created well, how do I put this? We manipulated a magnetic field in neodymium magnets and knocked them out of phase. So we were able to take the 2 north poles or the 2 south poles, and when you push them together, they obviously don't want to stick.
One thing I want to point out is that anytime you're combining more than one frequency, you're actually creating beat frequencies one or two or more frequencies, you're creating beat frequencies, which are very much indicative of squeezed coherent states, that you're having squeezed coherent states. Look up if you look up squeezed states and coherent states, and you can see what a squeezed coherent state is in quantum mechanics, and it looks literally like a waveform with beat frequencies. And those are literally, quite literally, what is generated. Now, with regards to the particles that you're talking about, why did you feel the need to create a whole new particle? Why couldn't this just be an inherent property of the photon or the light itself? Where does this extra particle come from?
Well, we sort of believe that if you look at the universe itself, and you look at if you take a star, for instance, we've always believed that the core of stars is solid, and we published this years and years ago, before NASA and SOHO decided and changed their mind that the sun wasn't just a big gas ball and that it could theoretically have a solid core. But we've always sort of understood that the core was solid, and our take is that for the gravity side, this was our reasoning, was that when a star goes supernova and explodes, it's not just all the gas that goes off out into space. The core becomes supercritical and becomes that dense. The gravity that it's creating becomes like unimaginable. But basically, when it explodes, the core fractures and breaks up, and whole pieces of this core fly out into the infinite of space. And each one of these cores has enough gravity in it to start pulling, and whole clumps of it all spin off into the infinite of the universe. But they also pull all the gas and all the material together again. So each one of these clumps start pulling gas and matter to itself and creates a new planet over maybe billions of years. But the planets are all formed around these, what we call a star seed, which is a piece of an existing star that has blown up. And the bigger pieces are powerful enough, gravitationally powerful enough, to open up a new wormhole or a new black hole to suck in from another part of the universe matter to become more and more condensed, and it reaches a critical point then where it literally starts producing like the hydrogen and everything, so just basically to become a star again. So a new star's born that way. But when that happens, this new star then streams off these particles, which then pass and travel back to the star seed. So they're being emitted away from the star. So the core of the Earth has a star seed. Mars, Jupiter, all the different planets, they all have a seed at the core which attract these particles back. And that's what we believe is the interaction of gravity. So when we've shielded things, you have to shield it in a special way. It's not just about creating several harmonics on a piece of material. What we've done is we take the magnets which we worked on creating bipolar jets. So our magnets, we can have the two south poles stick together.
Yeah, I wanted to ask you on the engineering side specifically, because you mentioned that earlier, and I've been thinking about it ever since you first said it. How is it that you're actually controlling or modulating these very high strength magnets?
Right, what we've done is we've had to build like our own technology to develop technology, because it's not off the shelf. Like you guys are all familiar with that. This isn't stuff you can go in Radio Shack.
Yeah, right. We want to basically know how it would be constructed so we can attempt to either do a replication or at least learn about it.
Yeah, what we did, it's like if you look at the basics of the magnet, how the electrons line up, what we did was we built a piece of equipment which consisted of AC and DC coils in a cylinder, and we applied different frequencies into the coils using a combination of like crystal resonators based on quartz.
What kind of range were the frequencies in, if you don't mind me asking? Because just to get to the sort of technical details, like what kind of power and what range of frequencies were you guys running with?
Well, at the time, we run the apparatus off the equivalent of about 10 kilowatts of power.
10 kilowatts or 10 kilovolts, you said?
No, 10 kilowatts.
10 kilowatts, that's a lot of power, wow.
And what I'll do, like when you guys are on next as well, I'll drop some papers on with all the information, and you can play with it because you might be able to improve on it.
That would be incredibly helpful and very welcome.
So to answer your question anyway, so what we did with the magnets, and this was, I actually spoke in Sharjah in the Middle East, outside of Dubai, at a physics conference on this one particular technology that we did, and it was published in like a peer-reviewed publication, but a closed-door publication. Every year there's a few hundred scientists and physicists get together, and we go to different parts of the world and hold a big conference. So the resulting publications like a telephone book of everybody's work, but it's only given out to the people in the conversation, in the conference. And I've represented the Ukraine for a number of years at these conferences, and spoke about like the technology that we developed. So on the magnet side, what we've done is basically destabilized the magnetic field in a series of resonating magnetic fields, where we focus the magnetic frequency into the magnet in the middle of the cylinder. So we put the magnet in the cylinder, and it floats within a DC field in the middle, and then we have a series of AC, DC, AC coils around either.
It floats. By floats, do you mean it magnetically it's magnetically coupled and sort of rests in a magnetic approximation, or do you mean it physically, mechanically is levitating in the center of this thing?
Yeah, it levitates in the middle. It's being held there by the electromagnetic field. So what we do is we play these several frequencies into the magnet, and we keep turning the amplitude up. And what happens is the magnet just drops out the field, and when it drops out the field, it's done. It just falls to the bottom of the cylinder onto the lab bench. Now, when we take two of these magnets, you've got north-north repel, south-south repel, north-south stick, which is normal. But what happens with these magnets, if you push, say, the two south poles or the two north poles together, they fight like they don't want to stick. Right. And then all of a sudden, they suddenly pulse and stick. Now, when they stick, you end up with a south pole, say, at either end, or a north pole on the outside, with your south pole in the middle, which creates...
What kind of a configuration is this that you put these magnets in where you can push them together like this? Is this a solenoid, just a single coil solenoid of some sort, or is there a coil configuration?
Just by hand. No, just by hand. You can set the magnets literally by hand and take the two south poles.
You just mean mechanically force them together, the bodies of the magnets themselves.
What happens is it's like we don't want to stick, so you're like trying to push them, and it's like we don't want to go. And then all of a sudden, you feel the magnet pulse, and they jump and stick together. I have got a picture of iron filings.
Let me grab some magnets. I've got two magnets. I got to try that.
So what happens is, though, that you end up with jets coming out of both ends of the magnet. So you have like North Pole jets or South Pole jets. Now, what you do then is you make, like you can either use microwave electromagnetics, or you can use static. there's all different sorts of ways you can generate the frequencies, but the idea is to then generate the frequency in the coils around, you put a coil around these magnets where the two north poles are stuck together, and you apply these frequencies into the coil, and what happens is the magnet starts to try and separate and reconnect. So when it does that, what it's doing, it's flipping the electrons in the atomic structure of the magnet. So it's sort of like, let me escape, let me stick, let me escape, let me send. It starts to resonate. Now that the magnets then start creating a harmonic signal. And as they start to separate and connect, they start creating a secondary field in the copper winding that you're putting your audible signal in, because you've now got a movement of north-south poles flipping, almost like not solid state, because there's a resonance there in the connection, but as they oscillate, they're creating a flipping of the poles in the coil, and it sets up like this harmonic. Now that harmonic is transmitted through both of the north poles on either end of the magnet. Now when you set up several magnets like that and you aim that frequency at a particular material, then that material then resonates with a combination of the several harmonics, but you're focusing the harmonics into particular areas of the material. It's almost a bit like when you aim a laser at, say, a piece of wood, you're focusing energy at one point where the wood will burn and the rest of the wood's unaffected. So by setting these frequency generators up around the material, you're able to create areas of different resonant frequencies within the material. And when you do that, it seems to shield the material from this flow of outside. We don't know what the particles are, we haven't got a name for them, but it shields from these particles. And when you do that, the effect is like not complete anti-gravity, but you can definitely, with like the machine video, I'll try and share it with the group, but I think it's on our website anyway. But with the gravity assist, it actually reduces the weight, so you can literally pick 1.5 ton up from one end of this machine and lift the machine up. You can even put wheels on this particular piece of technology, like small wheels, and you could put one of the things we did, we put several 25 kilo bags of cement on one end, and when you move the machine forwards, it floats up in the air at the other end, and it will also lift the weight of the cement with it.
Yeah, I'm looking in the chat, and unfortunately we don't see the video, but I'd really love to see that. I did go on your website and browse briefly. I couldn't find the link to that video, but I'd love it.
I'll see if I can drop it on the group now with everyone, because I was, yeah, I'll see if I can do it now. Just bear with me one sec. I hope this works. Yeah, I think that's right. There you go.
So your name is Brian, right?
No, Robert.
Robert. Okay. I'm sorry. I'm pretty bad with names.
Yeah, me too.
I'm Mark. So.
Yeah, I'm not a physicist. It's just that I've spent my whole life, I'm like 56 now. I've spent my whole life as an innovator, and I've built things that fly, engines, new propulsion systems, and Tachyon Aerospace has been around in a group form, a bit like you guys are doing with gravitics and everything. We've been around for about 10 years. Prior to that, I've spent 36 years with all this sort of research. I've married a Ukrainian woman, so I lived out in the Ukraine, and then ended up representing the Ministerium of the Ukraine in a whole bunch of physics conferences around the world. So, and then like with the aerospace company, we've actually solved a lot of interesting things. But like I was listening to what you guys were saying before, we've had like we're connected with like the Commander-in-Chief for Space Force and Space Command and the scientists there and like all the aerospace companies, but they're all, and we've been to conferences around the world and spoke at aerospace conferences with NASA and everyone, and they're all, like you guys are saying, they're all doing it for the wrong reasons.
Right. So why do you think we don't actually have these craft nowadays? What's the hindrance, in your opinion?
I think ultimately it's like innovation comes down to the ability to think out of the box. That's all it is. And the problem is, it's like you guys are all genius because it's like you think you're not blinkered. The problem is if you take an engineer, like we have people that work with us, and any day we would take someone before they go to university and before they study their engineering degrees, because when they do that, they literally end up focused. It's like they're taught to think a particular way and not to look at things outside of that spectrum.
I totally agree with you on that. And I actually had an argument before with Jeremy about it. I think science is a bit of a cult. And they have their methodology. And if you think outside the box, you're spanked and given an F. And I'm kind of I'm proud of the fact that I've never, graduated college. I've never technically even graduated high school. Just spent my entire life researching the Bible, and learned everything that I learned autodidactically. And I know many people in this field that are like that. And usually the out of the box thinkers are the ones that haven't gone through that that mindset that puts you in the box and you can't think out of it.
Yeah, because we it's like we were at one aerospace conference in particular. We were in Macedonia, and NASA was there, and I think Airbus and a few others were there. And one of our team asked the NASA guy, I think his name was Bill, and said, why is it when you've got companies and engineers and people like ourselves that have got this radically advanced technology that's built that people can see working and touch and see, why is it that it's really difficult to put this into the industry? And NASA turned around and said that if you're 12 months ahead of your time with what you're researching and what you're doing, the rest of the industry considers you crazy. If you're 6 months ahead of your time, you're also considered crazy.
I'm dealing with that exact situation, and I'm getting divorced, and she's using that against me. But I totally understand what you're saying. Anyone who is open enough to think of anti-gravity in this sense of buying a klystron and, actually trying this stuff, they're considered crazy. And so was Galileo, and so was Einstein, and so was everybody who've ever thought out of the box, ahead into the future. They've always considered them crazy. So I think it's a good sign.
Yeah, no, it's like we use off the Apple thing as to the crazy ones, the rebels, the misfits. That speech, we have that on our website and on our LinkedIn. It's like our whole team sort of operate that way. We don't conform to rules, and we just do what we do the way we do it. But it's our experience has been that we looked at thinking gravity was to do with magnets. We thought gravity was to do with like microwaves. We built a number, I think was maybe pictures of small plasma reactors and generators that we've built, and they all operate, they all do the job. Like our engines have 2 of these reactors on either end of our engines for particular reasons, but what we realised was that and also it ties in with the Bible as well in some ways, because we sort of realised that anything that you need to move, anything that you need to like create anti-gravity or to create an effect of anti-gravity can't be done with a magnet. It can't be done with a microwave, but it can, but the understanding is that the frequency is an audible frequency, and the combination of these 7 frequencies together shield the object, which then allows you to be able to easily move or lift the object. Like the objects has still got, and when you understand that these objects are mostly empty space anyway, if you was to take like a 20-ton stone slab of granite, if you remove all the empty space, you're left with something the size of a pea. Now, the particles that flow through that, most of them that would have most of them that would have flowed through that slab when it was big would have created a greater like eddy current and a greater laminar flow through the bigger space, the bigger volume of empty space than it does when it's been condensed to the size of a pea. So
I have a quick question about this before I'm about to head to bed, but I'm intrigued by the 7 waveforms that you add together to generate the single waveform that you need to use to create this. And I was wondering the shape of that waveform. You know, like when I think of adding up different frequencies, I think of like a Fourier series kind of expansion where each one of these 7 things is a different term on the Fourier series. And I just kind of think of like when you start adding up different frequencies, you end up getting a different shape of a wave, you know. So I was wondering if this shape of the waveform, is it closer to like a square wave, a sawtooth?
It's almost like a quasi sort of, because you're coming at the material from different directions and focused different frequencies from different directions. The frequencies that you generate, they're unique to the particular form of acceleration. So if you're using a tuned quartz crystal with an electromagnetic field which is being generated from the oscillating magnet in the coil, that field is unique in its own right, and it doesn't, you can't plug an oscilloscope in or anything and look at the signal, because when you plug like an oscilloscope in, or even if you put a transducer onto the steel block to look at it, it's just noise. It's like out of phase. The noise that's being created, the harmonics, it just comes back as noise and not as a signal. It doesn't show you a sawtooth or a square wave or anything. But if you move your transducer around the material, depending on which magnetic jet and the way you've got it configured around the particular sample piece, different parts of it resonate at different frequencies at all times. So it's a bit like, maybe you could look at it like having a guitar and you play different notes as you move your finger down the string. The block is a combination of different frequencies at different parts of the material, but when you put these several frequencies together, then it shields these particles passing through, which then reduces the weight of the object. And the microwave stuff that you're doing works, that creates the frequencies, the magnetics, the electromagnetics. We've been playing with this for 35 years, and where we're at now with it is the understanding that we've come to. There may be other ways. It's not just that what we're doing is the answer, but we've had results where we've got these machines to operate. The video that I dropped, the Google Drive video, this machine operates on them principles, and we've had that machine running the best part of 10 kVA 24 hours a day. We can configure it. It's part of our flight system, but we can configure this machine to gyroscopically change the way the energy pulses through it in a helix, so we can manipulate the gyroscopic flow. And when we do that, this whole machine just literally, there'll always be one part of the machine on the floor. Don't get me wrong, there's one bit on the floor, but it will lift up. So if we slow down a particular set of drums in the configuration, then the whole machine will tilt up, say, at 45 degrees to the left. But what's interesting is you can put several 25 kilo bags of cement on the back end of the machine, and it will lift its own weight and the weight of the cement like it's not even there.
But it's still pushing against the ground effectively, so it does have a counterpoise, and whatever weight it lifts on one side, regardless of its leverage advantage, even though it's gyroscopically attenuated, it basically can only lift as much as it can push down on the opposite side. Is that correct?
Yeah, but if you put a set of scales on the other side, you know, like the big industrial ones that you stick a pallet on.
Yeah, this is the important part. Go on.
Yeah, and you lift it, it doesn't see the cement, it only sees the machine.
Now that is particularly strange.
Now that's the bit that we got excited about, because this whole machine is operating on these principles.
Wouldn't that mean, though, if it didn't see the cement, I mean, the cement is sort of an arbitrary weight in terms of the total mass, right? So you could have put a lot more cement or a lot less cement on there, but if it didn't see the cement at all, as if it didn't register that lifting force at all when it did its action, I mean, wouldn't that mean effectively you could put an infinite amount of weight there and it would still respond the same way and never low down the scale?
Well, we to be honest, we only ever tried it with several bags of cement. That's all we had.
But that's still, I mean, we're talking, what, a few hundred pounds, perhaps?
Yeah, 25 kilos a bag in England.
That's significant. I just wonder what the upper limits of that experiment are, and yeah, I would love to see a paper or data, video, or just anything of that experiment at all. I would love to review that information and just take a look at it so I can see a little bit more about how it was done and hopefully gain something to take away from it.
Well, on the video, on the group chat, I've dropped a link to a video of the machine running.
I did see the video of the machine. It just shows the array spinning with each of the individual pieces, but it doesn't really show what it's capable of doing or lifting as far as I was able to see. So I'm just wondering if you have any other materials other than just.
Yeah, no, we have more stuff that I'll dig out and share. Yeah, the way that machine operates is because of the frequencies. What we're doing is we're constantly removing the weight from one side of this machine, and in doing that, it rotates. So it's how do you explain? Do you know when I was saying about the bipolar fields and the frequency? What we actually do is we take the weight away from one side of each one of the drums by changing the harmonics. Like you'll hear when the machine's running, it's got a weird sort of, apart from the unfortunate clacking that was, the chassis wasn't quite balanced.
Like on these drums, are there electrical connections or are there mechanical vibration systems or piezoelectric transducers? I mean, how are these cylinders connected to the frame and how are they receiving whatever harmonic they're receiving? I was confused by the setup because it doesn't really show any of the operating parameters. It just sort of shows these things spinning on this machine. So could you explain a little more?
Yeah, what we've got, we have a central shaft with the arms coming off the shaft, and then on the end of each set of two arms, we have another fixed drive shaft that has a hole going into it. And then the actual drums are fixed on a bearing at each end, so the drum's free to just spin on the shaft. And then each one of the drums weighs within the region of about 60 kilos each. And inside the drum, on the shaft, which doesn't move, is our bipolar field generator array, which is sending the different harmonic frequencies into the drum itself on one side.
Then I guess
So-
that's really the heart of the question then, because if I'm understanding correctly, just to kind of backtrack before you get too far in the description. So I understand. So this machine has a central shaft. The central shaft rotates the entire assembly of rods that hold the individual drums. The drums themselves, if I'm understanding correctly, again, are independently suspended from each shaft. They have no mechanical torque connection to that shaft other than their ability to be freely rotated. So otherwise they don't receive any power or have a connection. Each of the drums contains an independent system of this field generator, and that system operates without external power inputs from the machine or any other connections. Is that all correct? Am I understanding?
We put into the actual machine, we put 20 volts of power in. If you look at the machine on one end, we've got this bit of a bodged up set of brass strips as a slip ring that we bodged together.
Okay, so each of the drums then receives 20 volts from this slip ring.
Well, 20 volts, 80 watts across the whole of the 8 drums.
Are they in series, parallel, that kind of thing?
No, we're all individual. We've got the power supply going in, so we got the 20 volts at about 80 watts of solar power that we used on it.
Oh, that's
going
cool.
in, and then that's fed into each of the drums along the wiring through the hole in the end of the fixed shaft that the drums are allowed to rotate on, and then that powers up the field generator. And then what that's doing is one side of the drum is constantly lost weight and the other side becomes heavy, so the drum constantly rotates. Now the drums will typically rotate at about 3,500 RPM. Now the video doesn't do it justice because of the frame rate refresh on the video camera, but effectively we've got 860 kilo gyros spinning at 3,500 RPM set up in a helical form on a shaft, which then it transmits the gyroscopic energy from the outside spinning drums via lever action to the central shaft, which then generates like several ton of torque on the end of the drive shaft.
So the drive shaft, is that actually spun at all mechanically, or is the spinning of the drive shaft a result of the motion of the drums?
The drive shaft's only a result of the motion of the drums around in orbit.
Okay, thank you. That really helps clarify too. That helps quite a bit actually. And I guess the other big question would be the secret of what's inside the drums with these field generators. I mean, are these mechanical gyroscopic systems, or do they have some kind of electrical field component?
The solid state to a degree of just the bipolar magnets, which are set up inside coils, that we create a set of frequencies that get played into each one of the coils.
Yeah, we would love to see a diagram of the magnet assembly, because we'd love to, independently replicate and validate your work if that's a possibility.
Yeah, no, but we're happy to share this. It's not a problem.
That's fantastic.
Yeah, so what you have to remember is, well, this is probably a dumb thing to say, but Nidium magnets are pretty powerful in their own right, so you don't need to create any sort of energy. You don't need to increase energy to make them any stronger. So if you've got an N52 magnet that's, say, 20 mil diameter by 60 mil long, then that's a pretty significant neodymium magnet, N52. It's a real powerful magnet. Now you take 2 of them and you reprogram the atomic structure of them so the electrons can flip, so you can stick the 2. I'll see if I can drop a picture to the group so you can see the.
That would be really helpful, because honestly, I've looked up some of the information that you've said so far and just tried to Google it, and I've had a heck of a time finding anything.
Yeah, a lot of this stuff's secret. This isn't.
anything you could share, though, pretty much we're counting on you to share whatever you can so we can try to validate this stuff. That would be fantastic, because it seems like you really hold the key here in terms of what you've worked on. You're the guy to go to for the info. So anything you can provide would be excellent, and we would really appreciate it.